Today, who has spent decades of service and support of the unborn. Along with being one of the most well-known American priests, he's the founder and national director of Priests for Life. Please welcome Father Frank Pavone. How are you doing today?
Hello, Tom. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's great to have you with us. Now, share with us a little bit about Priests for Life, how it got started, and the work that you were doing.
Well, Tom, you know, when I was a teenager, actually, and I was in public schools, I became very interested in the issue of abortion. I saw the March for Life happening in Washington, and I said, these are the smallest people. They have to be protected. They have to be given the right to life. And so I began to get active in the pro-life movement. And as I studied for ministry and then became ordained and was serving in New York City in a large church, my pro-life activities just expanded so much that I came to a point where I said, I want to do this full time. I felt a call within the call, as I referred to it. And I got the necessary permissions within the church to do this as my full-time ministry. That is to educate people about abortion, to reach out to young moms and dads who are afraid and troubled and feel tempted to go to the abortion clinic, and to show them that there are alternatives, and also to bring healing to those who have had abortions and suffer the terrible after effects of that. And around those three goals, we developed what is now one of the largest pro-life organizations in the world, as you mentioned, called Priests for Life. But it's not just for priests. It's not just for Catholics. It's for anyone who wants to help bring an end to abortion. And that's been my full-time work now for almost 30 years. And we educate and mobilize people for that great cause.
Wow. And I want to ask you to share a little bit about what has changed over the years, and especially when it comes to our national laws on this. And we've seen recently different states going different directions. Some are making laws that seem to make abortion easier or less restrictive, and some states are making laws that are putting further restrictions. So what do you see happening, and what is your thought on what's going to happen on the federal level?
Yes, well, this is a very important aspect of our work. It is the role of the church to advocate for justice and for life, even in the political arena, and we do this. And as you said, things have been progressing very nicely. 2021, as a matter of fact, has been a year of some of the most productive pro-life legislation on the state level. We have seen more and more states say, look, we want to protect these babies in the womb. And a lot of the times the courts have said, well, you can protect them in the latest months of pregnancy, but not in the earlier part of pregnancy. And this is very much the battle right now. We just had, for example, the Supreme Court accept a review of the law in Mississippi that protects the baby starting at 15 weeks of development. And Texas has just enacted a law protecting the baby from around 6 weeks of development. And other states have taken similar measures. This is getting us closer and closer to the goal, of course, of protecting all these children. The Supreme Court is now in a position to review these kinds of laws. They have said, okay, we're going to look at this again, because the state does have, and they've said this ever since Roe v. Wade, in 1973, which legalized abortion throughout pregnancy, the courts have always said, well, the state does have an interest in protecting the life in the womb, as well as protecting the health of the mother. Now, how those interests interact with each other, this has been the battle over all these decades. And so we're making progress in being able to make these laws stick. And I think that 2022 is going to see a real big change, whereby the courts are finally going to acknowledge that if the people of a state and their elected representatives and their governor want to protect the child in the womb at any stage, that they have the right to do so.
Wow, and we know that the legal aspect is very important for what people are able to do or not do, but the courts are making these decisions. The legislatures are making these laws based on the medical science. And so what have you seen in recent years? I mean, compared to where we were when Roe v. Wade was decided, I think the scientific knowledge, the medical knowledge has increased so much to when we can see a heartbeat, what we know about just the development of a baby in the womb. And so what have you seen as far as those developments in those areas, and how do you think that it might be changing opinions within the courts and the legislatures?
Well, Tom, you hit the nail on the head. A lot has changed since Roe v. Wade. Things have changed in the scientific arena. Ironically, we have learned more about the baby in the womb from a medical and scientific point of view from the time of Roe v. Wade until now than we ever learned in human history previous to that. And Roe v. Wade ignored the scientific knowledge that we had developed over centuries about the development of the child in the womb. Well, now the courts are being presented with this new information and with this scientific evidence in ways that have not been done so far. And that, of course, strengthens the argument that this truly is a person in the womb, just like the rest of us, and this person deserves protection. Secondly, things have changed culturally in people's understanding about how abortion impacts them. And this is where we have a project called Silent No More. Those that have had abortions and speak up about their experience, they are contradicting the myth that this is some kind of helpful thing to have abortion, that this is some kind of just a purely private choice that you do it and then you move on with your life. What so many of these moms have found is that they can't move on with their life. Abortion has destroyed their confidence. It's destroyed their relationships. It's destroyed their trust. And a lot of times it's destroyed their faith in God. So we're giving healing to these people, but we're also giving them the opportunity to speak up, even to the court, and to include their testimonies in briefs to the court to say, look, you thought you were doing good for women by giving them the so-called right to abortion, but look, you've done damage instead. And we're confident that the court, that's going to help the court take a second look at whether abortion really should be allowed. Then we have other changes too, safe haven laws, for example. Roe v. Wade said, well, it's a very distressful situation that a woman can be in if she's pregnant and she doesn't have the right to an abortion. Well, that's not so true today anymore in the sense that there are more options. Safe haven laws in all 50 states enable a mom who is just in a position where she cannot raise the child to literally drop that child off, no questions asked, to a fire station, a hospital, or another designated location, and the baby will be taken care of and she'll be free of that obligation. We can go on and on, but to sum it up, things have changed. And this gives the courts as well as the legislatures a chance to look anew at the question, a very simple question, why shouldn't we protect the youngest and smallest of human beings?
Well, that is so great. I want to ask you, share just a little bit more about the post-abortion healing that you work on. You talk about how women are affected or families are affected when an abortion happens. But unfortunately, I think so often those in the pro-life movement, even those in the church, can kind of reject women that have made that decision to get an abortion. And so share a little bit more about maybe how you feel the church should respond and what you're doing to provide that post-abortion healing.
When we train clergy on how to preach on this topic, when we train individual citizens on what they can do to end abortion, we always tell them, begin with the healing. Begin with a clear affirmation that we who reject abortion do not reject those who have had abortions, but rather we embrace them, we love them, we want to bring them to the peace and healing of Christ and the church. And we do this every day by means of something called Rachel's Vineyard. They are retreats that we offer, about 1,000 a year in about 72 different countries. And Rachel's Vineyard is based on solid psychological research about the trauma of abortion and upon the Word of God and the sacraments of the church. And what these retreats do is they bring not only the moms, but the dads, and as you mentioned, the whole family, which is wounded by abortion, brings them to face what they've done and find some peace and healing. If anyone listening to us now has either had an abortion or knows somebody who needs this healing, I want to give you a simple place where you can go, abortionforgiveness.com. And at abortionforgiveness.com, you enter in a zip code within the United States, and you can find the place nearest to you, the healing ministry nearest to you that can guide you through these steps of healing. So we have to give the message of compassion. We are on your side. We are with you. Tom, I've ministered to people who've had as many as 25 abortions. And even they can find and will find the peace and mercy of Christ if they turn to ministries like ours.
Well, that is wonderful. And you did share earlier that Priests for Life is not just for priests or even just for Catholics. Tell us a little bit about how people can get involved in your organization, and even on the maybe the bigger picture, what are some things that people that want to make a difference can do to help impact some of these decisions we've been talking about with the laws in our nation?
There's so much people can do. They can connect with our ministry, first of all, at endabortion.us. Endabortion.us will show them the resources for healing, the resources for education. They'll find reading material there, and they'll find an action alert page front and center. And the action alerts, for example, will tell people there's a piece of legislation being debated now in Congress. Quick, get on the phone, call your representatives. Here's what you tell them. And it gives them the wording, it gives them the phone number, and we make it as simple as possible. But people should never underestimate how much of an impact those phone calls make. We work with legislators all the time in DC and in the state level, and boy, it matters when they hear from their constituents about these things. So endabortion.us can be like a one-stop shopping for all these resources and this action, and also for, knowing what to say to somebody if they feel they have to have an abortion. We have connection with all the pregnancy centers across the country and how people can easily access those as well. So the material is there, the resources are there. We are ready, my brothers and sisters, for your involvement, because this movement needs everybody, no matter how old, no matter how young, no matter what your religious background or your professional background. There's something for everyone to do, and we need each and every one of you.
Well, that is great. And as you share about how people can get involved, I'm glad you shared about how meaningful those calls are to our congressmen, our senators, because I think sometimes people think, well, how much is one phone call going to do out of everybody they represent? But share with us, what do you think is the biggest issue that Christians should be focused on today as we look at this pro-life issue, the different laws, again, the different states that are going different directions? What do you think is the biggest thing to be focusing on and praying for right now?
Well, the biggest thing to be focusing on, praying on right now is the simple question that as I said before, the Supreme Court itself is re-examining. Should we not protect these children? We have, as you have had in other segments of this very program that we're on today, I'm so happy to be on with you. People are helping victims of natural disasters. People are helping children who are sick. People are helping in so many different ways. This is part of who we are as Christians, is part of who we are as Americans. And the simple, basic question, should we not protect the smallest, the most dependent? It's strange to me. It's always been strange. That's how some people argue that because the baby is dependent on the mother and can't live outside the womb for much of the pregnancy, well, therefore that somehow becomes an argument not to protect the baby. It seems to me that's an argument to give more protection to the baby. And that's the fundamental issue, which resolves itself also in this question. Do people see what abortion is? We have to challenge people. They think they have an opinion on abortion. I ask them, have you ever seen one? Have you ever really looked at what an abortion is? We have to make sure people are talking about the same thing when they're arguing over this word abortion, which for some has lost all its meaning. So let's get back to that basic question. What is an abortion? Let's look at it as an act of violence and let's press hard for the protection of these children.
Well, Father Frank Pavone, thank you so much for sharing with us today. And for those that want to find out more, they can go to endabortion.us. And thank you so much for the work you're doing. God bless you.